Your battery powered device is really two devices in one. One that needs to handle full load current on demand and one that needs to maybe barely survive on microamps. Most LDOs are optimized for one of these two states, and designing for both of them, that's a challenge. Hi, I'm Dr. Rakesh. The Power Up Circuit Lab series helps power electronics engineers tackle exactly these kind of design challenges, real evaluation hardware and data sheets that you can directly apply in your own work. In this video, we are going to look at 7 specific aspects of designing with a dual mode LDO. We will be demonstrating each of these using a real hardware, and everything you see in this video, the data, the figures and the waveforms, comes directly from the datasheet. Think about what your device actually does. In active mode, for example, taking a photo, streaming audio, or making a call, the load swings to hundreds of milliamps. In standby, almost nothing is happening, but the regulator is still drawing the quiescent current, isn't it? For each hour that's sitting in your pocket, the current is constantly flowing, and that adds up. So, what is the solution? You want a power architecture that adapts to what the system is actually doing. When the load is active and drawing the current, the regulator runs sets full circuit. When the system is sitting idle, you do not need all of that. A linear operating mode kicks in, drawing just a fraction of the quiescent current. So let us look at how that works in a block diagram. The logic is handled at the bottom left by the main control block, which monitors your external enable and mode pins. When you toggle the mode pin, the block drives the internal mode control trace. The dual mode architecture is built into the core of the IC and not as an external workaround. You pull it high and the IC switches to its full featured operating mode. Pull it low and it drops to a leaner, lower power configuration. For this device, normal mode gives you 500 milliamps output at 350 microamps quiescent. Low power mode gives you 20 milliamps output at 20 microamps quiescent. Now here are figures 2 and 3 side by side. Figure 2 on the left is the quiescent current in low power mode. Figure 3 on the right is the quiescent current in normal mode. Look at the two y-axes carefully here. The left chart runs at 30 microamps. The right runs at 600. The gap is where your battery life comes from. If your device spends most of its time in standby, and most portable devices do, the left chart is what determines how long it lasts. And all this with just one mode pin. This is how you manage both of them. So you have the mode pin wired up. Now the question is, how do you switch it without disturbing the output? Because the mode pin does not handle the transition for you. The whole system does. And the engineers who miss this, they risk a severe voltage transition right at the moment of switching. So what's the solution? The solution is a defined sequence. Reduce the load to a safe level, then initiate the mode change and wait for the device to settle before applying the full load again. Let me show you that with a timing diagram. Here is figure 14, the mode transition timing diagram. Going from low power mode to normal mode. Keep the load at or below 1 milliamps. Drive the mode pin high, then wait 50 microseconds before applying full load. Going the other way, reduce the load to low power mode levels, 80 microseconds before pulling the mode pin low. Keep the load constant during the settling, 50 microseconds in one direction, 80 in the other. The two transition directions have different settling requirements, and that asymmetry matters. Now here is figure 5, the LPM to HPM transition on the oscilloscope. V in is 2.1 volts, V out is 1.8 volts. Watch the I out trace step from 1 milliamps to 500 milliamps. And look at what happens to the V out. With a 20 millivolt change in the transient, It's almost negligible. That is the output transient under a properly managed transition. The 20 microsecond timescale shows exactly how fast the device recovers. Here is figure 6, the HPM to LPM direction. V in is 2.1 volts, V out is 1.8 volts, same as figure 5. Watch the I out trace down as the load is reduced before the mode pin switches. And look at V out, it barely moves here too. The time scale is 50 microseconds per division, which is much wider than figure 5. That reflects the longer settling time in this direction. Both transitions, managed correctly, produce a clean output. And here is JU2 on the hardware. This jumper sets the mode pin. Place it in NOR and it pulls mode high, putting the device in the normal mode. Place it in the LP and it puts mode low, switching to a low power mode. This is the physical control for everything we have covered in this section. The mode pin switches the IC. The host system manages the load and the timing. We need to get both of them right. The voltage divider is one of the most fundamental circuits in electronics. Two resistors and a ratio. For an adjustable LDO, that simple circuit is what gives you flexibility across the entire output voltage range. Here on the board, you can see R1 and R2. Those are the two small resistors next to the IC. If you look at the datasheet formula, it usually calls the top resistor R2 and bottom R1. But be careful, on the specific evaluation kit, the labels are swapped. R1 is your top resistor at 200 kilo ohm and R2 is your bottom resistor at 301 kilo ohms. The datasheet solves for the top resistor directly. Start with the bottom resistor, the 301 kilo ohms, and multiply by V out over V feedback minus 1 with a target of 1.0 volt and a 0.6 volt reference gives you 200 kilo ohms. The datasheet includes table 1, a pre-calculated table with resistor values for 9 common output voltages starting from 0.8 volts to 5.0 volts. So if your target is one of these, you do not need to calculate anything. Pick the row, order the resistors and you are done. But make sure to use the 1% tolerance or better in terms of the resistance. Here is a scenario that most of you will recognize. You have a buck converter stepping the battery voltage down just before the LDO. It looks efficient, but switching regulators, they generate noise. And if you are powering an audio codec or an RF front end or maybe a precision analog sensor downstream, that noise is a direct problem. The LDO sitting just after the switcher needs to filter it out. That filtering performance is what PSRR measures, the power supply rejection ratio. Figure 9 shows the input supply PSRR versus frequency. The LDO's error amplifier has a finite bandwidth. At low frequencies, it can actively cancel supply noise. As frequency climbs, the amplifier can no longer respond fast enough and the attenuation falls off. Rejection is strongest at low frequencies and degrades as the frequency increases. You might expect the PSRR to degrade here, but look at the curves. As the frequency climbs, the regulator's loop gain falls and the PSRR starts to degrade. At that point, the output capacitor and the rest of the output network take over the ripple attenuation. And here is figure 10, same measurement, but at an input voltage of 1.7 volt. That is the absolute minimum rated input voltage for this device, the point where your battery is nearly exhausted. The headroom is the same 700 millivolt as in figure 9 and the attenuation holds up. The PSRR does not fall apart at the floor of the operating range. That 700 millivolt condition, 1.7 volt input, 1.0 volt output is exactly what will be running in the hardware demo. In any real system, things can go wrong. Output shorts or loads draw more current than expected. Most engineers They check the output of the current rating and assume the IC will handle the rest of the things. But fault response matters. Does the IC shut down or it cycles or holds? That determines whether the system recovers on its own or needs a power cycle to reset. Figure 13 shows 3 layers of protection built into the IC. Current limiting holds the output at 700 milliamps, typical under a short circuit condition. If the fault persists and the die temperature reaches 165 degrees Celsius, thermal shutdown triggers and the output turns off. It resets at 150 degrees and tries again. If the fault is still there, the device cycles on and off between the two temperature thresholds. The third layer is the reverse current protection. If the input voltage drops below the output, the reverse current detector trips and disconnects the body diode path. This is relevant in battery backup and hot swap scenarios where V in and V out can swap roles. When the enable pin is pulled low, an internal 800 ohm resistor connects the output to ground. This active discharge path pulls the output voltage down in a controlled way, rather than letting it float down slowly on leakage. If your design has multiple power rails that needs to sequence up and down in a specific order, you need the discharge to be controlled. That is what makes the sequencing predictable. The POK output is what gives you direct visibility into when the sequencing is ready. Now here is figure 15, the power OK output versus the output voltage. POK is an open range signal. It goes high when the output reaches 91% of its regulation target and goes low if the output sags below 88%. Here you can see JU1, JU2 and the white POK test point, TP3 on the hardware. That is where you would probe the POK signal during evaluation. Every LDO turns the excess voltage into heat. The more voltage it drops and the more current it delivers, obviously more output is going to be produced. And in a 2 mm by 2 mm package, that heat has to go somewhere, isn't it? Here, the PCB is the heatsink. The thermal part is through the exposed pad on the underside of the package. That pad must be soldered to a copper ground pad on the PCB, with thermal wires connecting through to the ground layers below. Here on the back of the board, you can see those wires directly behind the IC footprint. Without them properly soldered, the thermal resistance increases and your power handling headroom shrinks. The exposed pad and the thermal wires are your heatsink. Do not skip them and make sure you are getting them right. Let us do a quick walkthrough of the board before we get into the demo. Primary side, you can see the input banana jack at the bottom center and the output banana jack at the top center. The ground connection is the jack on the middle side of the board. In the center is the ADPL40505A, that 2 mm by 2 mm package we have been talking about. Next to it are the C2 and C3, the input and the output capacitor, and C1, the BYP capacitor that controls the noise. R1 and R2 are the feedback resistors. Those are the two components setting the output to 1.0 volt on this kit, using the formula we already discussed in section 3. On the right, you have JU2, the mode jumper. The NOR and LP positions are from section 1 and 2. Below is the JU1, the enable jumper. And between them is the white test point TP3. This is the POK output we discussed in section 5. Now let us flip the board over. On the secondary side, directly behind the IC, you can see the thermal wires. Those are the plated holes beneath the IC footprint. They transfer heat from the exposed pad on the underside of the package down through the board to the ground layers below. This is the thermal path from section 6. Let us go ahead and power it up. Let's set the input voltage to 1.7 volt. And there you go. Now with a resistive load, you can see that the change in the voltage is still within the acceptable limits. 1.0 volt output from the 1.70 volt input. That's the 700 volt millivolt headroom live on the bench. I hope this video gave you a clearer picture of how to design a dual mode LDO. Not just what the spec says, but how to actually apply them. The datasheet and the board user guide links are in the description. Use the resistor table, the timing diagram, and the thermal calculation to build a design that fits your application. I'll see you in the next video.